So we're starting this new series on Jeremiah, and I know a number of you of a certain age are immediately thinking, Jeremiah, bullfrog or prophet? Okay. Don't worry if you didn't get that joke. It just means you're younger than I am. That joke was old when I was young. So Jeremiah is a prophet, and it's not the hardest book in the Bible, but it's also not the easiest. If you've been reading your Bible for a while and you're looking for something, you've read through Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and the Acts of the Apostles, you're like, I want to try an Old Testament prophet, then I would recommend Jeremiah. Don't start with Jeremiah, but he's also not the hardest. He's not as intimidating as Isaiah or as strange as Ezekiel. Because as much as I love Ezekiel, half the time you're looking at Ezekiel, you're like, what is going on here? This is just strange. But Jeremiah is very accessible. It is a book that you get into, and it's like, oh, this actually makes sense. This actually works for us understanding today. So this takes place about 600 years before Jesus, about 2,600 years ago from today. And what has happened is the nation of Israel has fallen into ill times. They've forgotten about God, they're worshiping pagan gods, and God is giving them this warning. He's already sent the Assyrians down, and the Assyrians came down about 3 generations prior and swept away the 10 northern tribes of Israel. And now the Babylonian forces are amassing, and they look ready to come and conquer Jerusalem and the area around it. And so in the midst of that, God gives this message to Jeremiah. He says, go down to the potter's house. And so Jeremiah goes down. And he sees the potter working on the clay. And he's working with the clay, and he's shaping it, he's working with it, and then there's problems. So wherever there's problems, he tries to reshape it, he tries to fix it, but eventually it's like, yeah, this isn't working, so he collapses it all down, starts over from scratch, does a hard reboot. And this makes sense to us, because we've all had 8th grade art class. We've all done that. We've all made those pots. I'm sure most of us have 1 or 2 of those pots lying around your house that you've made or your kids have made. Yeah? Yeah. Okay. So what God is saying to Jeremiah is he's saying, look, I will do the same thing to the nation of Israel that this potter is doing to the clay. Potter's going to work through the weaknesses, the problems, the things that there's issues. And if it's not working, he will put the whole thing down, reboot, and start over from scratch. And if he has to do that with the nation of Israel, so be it. And so now, I want to look at that passage and say, what does that mean for us? Because I think there's 3 different lenses that I want to look at today. There's one for all of us as individuals, because that's part of what's going on. Is that God works on us as individuals, our inconsistencies, our problems, our weaknesses, as he tries to fix us. See, the thing is God is working on each and every one of us. And you know what? It's not always easy. God will put people in your lives and put circumstances in your lives until you figure out what he's trying to work on. Until you're able to grasp that. You know that person in your life who is always impatient, always frustrated by being late for everything, and at the same time is always late? You know that person? Some of you are looking at other people in your pew, okay? But we all know that person. Do you ever notice that person hits an inordinate amount of red lights? Do you think there might be a connection? Do you think God might be trying to teach them patience? Okay. Here is the thing for all of us. God will continue to put people in your lives until you figure out these issues. There are certain personalities that all of us have trouble with. For each and every one, it's different. You might be bothered by something that this person does. It doesn't bother anybody else. But whatever that quirk is, whatever that thing is, whatever that problem is, until you figure it out, God will keep putting people in your lives till you learn that lesson. And if you're not able to figure out what that lesson is, ask yourself this. How many times when people ask you something, do you say, it's fine? Okay? I just assume after 25 years in ministry, if somebody says it's fine, that they're lying. Okay? They're lying to me, but more likely they're lying to themselves. It's just the way it works. And most of the time, you know how many times you get that defensive, dismissive, it's fine. And whenever I hear that, I'm like, lying to me, lying to yourself, lying to me, lying to yourself. And I assume lying to yourself. Maybe lying to me, but probably lying to yourself. And take a look at those points in your life and say, where is that? Where is it that's happening? Where is it that it bothers me? It drives me crazy. And yet when people ask me, I just say, it's fine. Because we try and out-stubborn God. We try and say, no, God, I know better. I'm going this way. Let me give you this example. We have a hardwood floor in our house. Just there when we bought it. Love it. Nice big covers. Kitchen, dining room, living room. It's great. There's one nail that always pops up. About once a week, this nail right by the silverware drawer pops up 1/4 of an inch. Okay, just enough to snag your socks. Okay? And when it does that, somebody just grabs the hammer we keep located nearby just for such an occasion and just go, okay, right back down. One shot. Boom, done. Okay. Every other nail in that floor is where it's intended to be. Every other nail is what God has intended for that. But once a week, and I wonder, does that nail enjoy it? Okay? Because it seems to. And sometimes I wonder, do people like us, meaning human beings, enjoy rebelling against God? And when God does, okay, we're going to do this again until you learn. This is what happened with the nation of Israel. They keep messing up. They keep ending up in the wilderness. They keep going out into the wilderness. God's like, I got to teach you a lesson. Okay? Not long after this particular prophecy, this particular episode, nation of Israel gets all carted out into exile. Spends 3 generations out in exile so they could learn. And that's formative and that's wonderful for them. And they are shaped to this very day by what happened in that exile. But would it have been easier to learn before getting hauled off into Babylon? I like to think so. But we do the same things as individuals. We refuse to learn. And my encouragement and my prayer for all of us is to look at those spots, to look at those places where you're saying it's fine and you keep having the hammer come down at you because you can't learn. And I'm going to tell you this. God's going to keep doing this. You cannot out-stubborn God. I know, I've tried. Okay? But the flip side is, God always loves us. God always hopes for us. So, that's the first thing, to look at us as individuals. Next thing I want to talk about just for a moment is Pastor Anna. As most of you know, I'm sure she has accepted a call for a youth and family position down in Nebraska. And we're all very excited for her. So if this is your first Sunday here, we're glad to have you. Normally we don't have cake. Normally we don't do this kind of thing. But it's exciting. So I want to commend you for something, and I want to share this with the congregation, is when Anna got here 3 years ago-ish, she said something very brave. She said, give me the hard truths. Give me the honest feedback. And you said something which I've kind of adopted because I like it so much. Clarity is kindness. And I want to encourage you in that, in this next call, to continue to ask for that. Continue to ask for that clarity. Ask for that honest feedback. Because you're going to a place with more responsibility and a bigger stage. And that's exciting. But it's also hard. And we're going to continue to pray that God grows you into that pastor that he's calling you to be. And I just want to say that I have tried over the last couple of years to really give you that honest feedback the best I could to give you that clarity. And if there was ever a time when it came across as honest, when it was meant when you were looking for affirmation or encouragement, I am sorry for my part in that. But it was always my hope, my prayer, to grow you into who God is calling you to be. And so everybody here is going to be excited to hear what God does next in your life, and just with a sense of unending curiosity. So we want to encourage you. And I am going to tell you that part of our prayer is that God puts people in your life to give you that honest feedback and that honest clarity, because without it, we don't grow. So we will take a few minutes at the end of the service to pray for her and just invite everybody forward in that. And then, of course, we have cake afterwards, because any excuse for cake. But the third way I want to talk about this passage is just us as a congregation. We were having a good discussion here in our church council 2 weeks ago, 10 days ago, somewhere in there. Really good, honest, thoughtful discussion about where are we going? What does this mean? And because I know there's a sense of unsettledness. Cynthia, who had been our organist here for 49 short years, retired a couple weeks ago and is heading down to Nebraska. And I said to our council, look, this sort of thing happens. Back in my last congregation, we had 3 people leave in the space of 6 months. It happens. One of them left because they needed a full-time job. We were only doing part-time for that position. So they took a full-time job, not a problem. Somebody else retired so they could take care of an aging parent. Again, it happens. And then the third one left to go back to Nebraska. So there is some discussion of Nebraska is the problem. But that's a different issue. I know, we'll just leave it at that. But might be Nebraska. We will do a deep dive into that at some point. But the reality is that change always happens. And it always does. And part of what goes on for us is that we continue to work forward in who God has called us to be. We continue to be this community here, sharing the light of Christ in Washington County. And that's going to always change. I don't know how many pastors have been here before me. I should really count it up, but it's been a good number. And God willing, there will be a good number of people here after me. We are called to this community. We are called to this place. And I will just tell you this, that I don't know if this is a blessing or a curse for y'all, but you guys are stuck with me for a while. I'm not going anywhere. I have spent 5.5 years figuring out where all the bodies are buried and all the dysfunctions, and I'm not going to another congregation to figure that out somewhere else, okay? I know how this place works. I'm too old and too stubborn to go anywhere else. But I want to tell you this. Even though I am just as old and stubborn as anybody around here, we continue to figure out how things are going to work. We continue to grow and adapt in this place to share the love of Christ with this community. And how that's going to do and how we're going to do that will change and continue to evolve, because this community continues to change and evolve. The message of Christ never changes, but how we convey that message does. And so it's exciting. Even though we're sad that Cynthia's retired, even though we're going to miss Anna, that doesn't mean the mission changes and doesn't mean our sense of excitement does. Now, what's interesting is that message or that metaphor about clay. This is not the only time it pops up in the Bible. At the very beginning of the Bible, we get this wonderful image where God shapes Adam, the first human, out of clay. And then he breathes his spirit into him. He breathes life into him from that. So humanity itself, we are powered by God's Spirit. And without God's Spirit, we do nothing. But there's another passage I really want to explore for you. If you'd put that second slide up, the one from Corinthians. Perfect, there, right there. Paul has this really neat image of we as human beings carry the light of Christ in earthen vessels. Sometimes you'll hear that referred to as jars of clay. But we carry that light, that spirit within us, that treasure in these frail human bodies. And what we have up here is a couple of clay pots that have been cracked and glued back together. And it is done so that we can see the light shining through the cracks. It's this beautiful way. Don't worry, I told them to do that. It is this beautiful way for us to understand how the light comes through our cracks. Because it is those places, those weaknesses that the potter has worked through where we see. Those addictions, those immaturities, those stubbornness, where God has worked through them, that we see the light of Christ shared with others. I will just share this with you. When I was in my 20s and early 30s, I had a colossal failure. Basically spent 3 years of my life working on a project, and it did not come out the way we had hoped. Literally 3 years of my life, I don't know how many thousands of dollars, how many tens of thousands of dollars, and it was painful. And as part of the process of shutting that down and part of the process of just discerning that, I wrote this long 20, 30-page analysis. Timeline of all the decisions, ways that we did things, ways that we could have done things differently. And it was in-depth and brutally honest. And I ran across that about 10 years ago. And I was just reading it again, and it was just like, wow, this was dark. The way I explained it to a friend of mine, it's like reading your diary from when you had a really bad breakup. It was painful. But what was interesting is how God has worked through those broken places in my life. And I like to think as I've matured, as I've learned, that those broken places from 25 years ago have been healed and have been redeemed for ministry and work today. And friends, I am not telling you that because I'm anything special. I'm not. I am telling you that because all of us have that hope. All of us have that chance to be changed by God, to be worked through, to have the light of Christ shining through those painful points so that Christ can be glorified. Now, if you got one of these blue pew Bibles, grab one of these, or if you got your own Bible, even better. And I want you to crack it open to page 1068. One of the ways that God is shaping this congregation is I feel called that we need to get more into our Bibles, more into reading through this, so that we, when we're making decisions in our life, we're understanding our place in God's Word. So what I want to do is I want to read this paragraph, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 7 through 12. And the reason we're doing this on the Bible, out of the paper, not off the screen, is because I want you to get in the habit of reading this. And if you don't have a Bible, feel free to grab one of these. Just take it. I won't tell anybody, okay? If you feel guilty, put an extra $5 in the offering plate. It's fine, okay? But let's go ahead and read 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 7 through 12. It's under that paragraph where it says, treasures in jars of clay. I'll start us off, and let's just read this together. But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so the life of Jesus may be manifested in our bodies. For we who live are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may be manifested in our mortal flesh, so that death is at work in us, but life in you. I love that passage of just how we're pressed down but not crushed, perplexed but not destroyed. And I want to encourage you to take that with you, knowing that the light of Christ resides within you. We're going to sing a song, and I'm sorry, refresh me, what's the name of it again? Called Me Higher, thank you. And it's this beautiful song about how we are called higher. Not just to stay in the same place, not just to bask in God's glory, but to be called to that new life, to be shaped, to be reformed in God's image, that we carry that treasure. Amen.